Let me tell you about the best hire I almost never made. A few years ago, I partnered with a client on a distribution center manager search in the Midwest. By the time they brought us in, the role had already been open for 4 months. Overtime was through the roof. Their best shift leads were picking up slack they shouldn't have been carrying, and 2 of them were already interviewing elsewhere. The whole operation was unraveling. We found the right person. He was running a similar facility right nearby. Solid track record, reduced downtime, built teams that stayed. Exactly the leader they needed. But here's the thing, when I reached out to him, you know what he told me? I'm not looking for a new job. I never would have applied for that job. I didn't know it even existed. And that's the reality most companies miss. And if you've had an operations role open for 60, 90, 120 days, it should change how you think about hiring. I'm Renee Fry, and this is Building Your High-Performing Team, where we help you hire smarter, reduce turnover, drive business results so you can finally sleep at night. If you want proven strategies to build teams that last, hit subscribe. We drop new insights every week. Now, most people hear that story and think, okay, so he just wasn't on the job boards. That's not a big deal. But it is a big deal because that individual, he was the right leader, not a pretty good candidate, not a, well, he checks most of the boxes type of hire. He was the person who walked in, stabilized that distribution center in 60 days and is still there running it today. And he never would have raised his hand. That's not a fluke. That's the pattern. The best operational leaders, the ones who actually reduce turnover, who fix broken shifts, who keep the floor running when everything's on fire, those people are gainfully employed. They're busy. They're not scrolling through Indeed at 10 p.m. thinking, maybe I should see what's out there. So when you post a job and wait for applications, you're only fishing in one pond. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's the shallowest pond available. You're seeing the people who are actively looking. Some of them are great, but the leader who's going to transform your operation, they're probably 20 minutes from your facility right now doing great work for someone else with zero intention of applying for any job. Here's what happens when you hire from who applies instead of who you actually need. There was an operations manager role, and I had identified a strong leader, someone who wasn't looking, someone I had spent weeks getting to know and understanding. He had already been in our pipeline because we stay in close contact with high-performing leaders over time. So when the right opportunity opens up, we already know who to reach out to call. And at the same time, they had someone in their applicant pool. Great resume, interviewed well, said all the right things, and this company wanted to move quickly. I told them, give it 2 more weeks. I'm confident there's a better long-term fit here. The company was tired of waiting. The role had been open for 3 months, so they moved forward and they hired someone from their application pool. 90 days later, that hire was gone. Not a culture fit. Couldn't handle the pace. And now they were right back to where they started, except with more damage. They lost 3 months of productivity, 2 strong team members, and their overtime costs alone hit 6 figures. They came back and said, we should have waited. That's how this plays out. Everything I've learned across my years of hiring operational leaders comes down to one framework. I call it the invisible leader principle, and it has 3 parts. If you're a VP of operations, a plant director, an HR director at a manufacturing or distribution company, this is the lens I want you to use every single time you have a critical role to fill. The best leaders are invisible to your hiring process, not because they're hiding, but because your process, job boards, career pages, LinkedIn posts are designed to attract people who are actively looking, and the best operational leaders almost never are. Think about it. If you've got a maintenance manager who's running a tight shop, keeping uptime high, keeping the team together, that person is not updating their resume on a Saturday. They're not browsing job listings. They're solving problems for someone else. Most companies don't consider this because the applications still come in. You post a role, you get 100, 125 applications, and it feels like the system is working. But Then you're actually read through the applications and how many of those 125 are genuinely qualified for the role. When I audit this with clients, the answer is usually somewhere between 2 and 4 out of 125. So you're not short on applicants, you're short on the right qualified people. And here's the other reality most companies don't talk about. In most facilities, the person leading hiring is an on-site HR manager juggling 10 other priorities, supporting the team, doing onboarding, employee relations, leadership development, and recruiting becomes reactive, not proactive. And the reason you're short on the right people is that your process only catches the ones who happen to be looking at that exact same moment you're hiring. That is not a strategy. It's hoping the timing works out in your favor. We hired a supply chain director last year for a food manufacturer in the Southeast. When I had approached her, she had been at her company for 7 years. Her resume wasn't on any job board. She wasn't looking for a job. She hadn't talked to a recruiter in years, but she was ready for a new challenge. She just didn't know that opportunity existed. Today, she's running a supply chain operation twice the size, and my client told me she's the best hire they've ever made in a decade. She was invisible, not because she was unqualified, because the system wasn't designed to find her. Now, knowing that, here's where most people go wrong. And this is the second part. Stop evaluating the best available applicant. Start defining the right leader, then go find them. This is the mindset shift, and it's harder than it sounds. When you have a role open and applications are coming in, the natural instinct is to compare. Who's the best of this group? Who's interviewing the strongest? Who has the most relevant resume? That's how you end up with the best applicant. And the best applicant is not the same thing as the right leader. Not even close. Here's what I mean. We had a client, a plant director at a plastics manufacturer, who needed a production supervisor. They got a stack of applicants, narrowed it down to 3, picked one who'd been a supervisor at a competitor. On paper, looked perfect. In reality, that person had been a supervisor in a very different culture and couldn't adapt to the pace, clashed with the team, and was gone in 4 months. The problem wasn't the person. The problem was the question they were asking. They were asking, who's the best applicant? Instead of, what kind of leader does this specific team in this specific operation actually need? Before you can source and recruit a single candidate, you should be able to answer, what's broken on this team that the right leader needs to fix? What's the culture on the floor? Is this a turnaround or sustain? What did the last person in the role get wrong? And when you define the right leader first, before you look at a single resume, you stop settling for whoever shows up. And you start measuring against what you actually need. And when you're clear on that, hesitation becomes your signal. Not something to rationalize, but something to listen to. And I'm going to tell you something that might get uncomfortable. Most companies skip this step because it's slow. They'd rather post the job today and start screening tomorrow. But that speed costs you, because a bad hire at the supervisor level or above doesn't just fail quietly. They take people down with them. They damage culture. They cost you 6 to 9 months of salary and lost productivity, rehiring, retraining, and that's a conservative number. Okay, so you now know the best people are invisible, and you know you need to define the right leader before you go looking. And that brings us to part 3, and that's the one that changes everything. Intentional pursuit beats passive attraction every single time. Posting a job is passive attraction. You put it out there and you hope the right person sees it. Sometimes they do. Most of the time, for senior operational roles, they don't. Intentional pursuit means going and finding the specific person your operation needs. It means identifying who's doing this job well at a similar facility, understanding what might motivate them to make a move, and building a relationship before you even pitch the role. This is what we do every day. And I'll tell you, the best hires I've ever made started with conversations, not applications. I reach out to someone and we'll just talk about their career. What are they proud of? What frustrates them? Half of the time, they're not ready to make a career change, and that's fine. But when they are ready, or when the right opportunity comes along, they take my call, because I wasn't selling them a job. job, I was learning what kind of move would actually matter to them. We hired a warehouse manager in Texas last year. It took 3 conversations and over 2 months before he was even open to hearing about the role. He wasn't unhappy. He just wasn't growing. And when I described the opportunity, the scale, the autonomy, the leadership team, it clicked. He said, "That's the role I've been waiting for. I just didn't know it existed." He didn't apply. He was pursued. And that's the difference. Now, can you do this for yourself at your company? In theory, yes. But let me be real with you. If you're a vice president of operations or a plant manager, your day is already stacked full. You're running an operation. You don't have time to spend 6 weeks building relationships with passive candidates while doing your job and covering the open role. That's why companies like mine exist. Not because you can't, because you don't have the bandwidth to do it well while keeping the operation running. Here's what I want you to take away from this. That distribution center manager I told you about at the top, the one who said I never would have applied, he wasn't some unicorn. He wasn't hiding. He was just doing his job at a different facility a few miles down the road. And the only thing that separated him from the stack of applications my client had already rejected was that someone went and found him. That's it. And the hire that failed, the one where the client picked the best applicant instead of the right leader, that wasn't a bad person. It was the wrong question. They asked, "Who's available?" instead of "Who do we need?" After all these years of hiring operational leaders, I can tell you the single most important thing I've learned. The best leaders are never found through job posts. They're found through intention. Every week that role sits open, your best people are covering the gap. They're working extra shifts. They're putting out fires that aren't theirs. And they're getting tired. You don't just lose the open role, you start losing people who are holding it together. So here's what I want you to do. Think about the hardest role you're trying to fill right now, the one that's been open way too long, and ask yourself honestly, are you looking for the best available applicant or are you pursuing the right leader? If you're not sure, or if you know the answer and it bothers you, I made a video about the 5 reasons your operation roles stay open that goes deeper than this one. Watch that one next. And if you're sitting there thinking, I need someone to go find my invisible leader, that's literally what TalentQ does every single day. We go find the operational leaders who will never see your post. And there's a link in the description if you want to talk about what that might look like for your open role. I'm Renee Fry, and I'll see you next week.